Just months after launching military strikes to stop Iran from advancing its nuclear program, the United States now appears ready to help Saudi Arabia build one of its own. At first glance, that sounds like a contradiction, but the proposed agreement is far more complex than simply building nuclear power plants. It could reshape the balance of power in the Middle East, redefine America's strategic partnerships, and trigger new concerns about nuclear proliferation across one of the world's most volatile regions. The biggest question is no longer whether Saudi Arabia will develop civilian nuclear technology. It is whether this agreement could one day create the foundation for something much bigger. Saudi Arabia has pursued civilian nuclear energy for years as part of Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman's Vision 2030 plan. The kingdom wants to diversify its economy beyond oil, reduce domestic oil consumption for electricity generation, and position itself as a technological leader in the Gulf. Unlike the United Arab Emirates, which operates nuclear power plants but imports its nuclear fuel under strict international agreements, Saudi Arabia has consistently argued that it should have the right to enrich uranium on its own territory. That issue has become the central point of negotiations with Washington. According to multiple reports, the Trump administration is preparing a 30-year agreement that would allow American companies to build nuclear infrastructure inside Saudi Arabia. The deal could be worth tens of billions of dollars and would create one of the largest civilian nuclear partnerships in the Middle East. Most importantly, after conducting a joint study with the United States, Saudi Arabia could eventually receive permission to enrich uranium at a US-built facility under agreed conditions. That single provision has transformed an economic agreement into a major geopolitical debate. Officially, this is a civilian nuclear agreement, but geopolitically, it serves several strategic objectives. First, Washington wants to ensure that Saudi Arabia builds its nuclear sector with American technology rather than turning to competitors like China or Russia. Both Beijing and Moscow have aggressively expanded their nuclear exports over the past decade. Nuclear partnerships often create relationships lasting decades, because reactors require continuous fuel supplies, maintenance, technical support, and regulatory cooperation. Winning Saudi Arabia's nuclear market therefore means securing long-term political influence as well. Second, the agreement strengthens one of America's most important security partners in the Middle East. Saudi Arabia remains a key player in global energy markets, regional security, and efforts to counter Iranian influence. Helping Riyadh develop advanced civilian technology reinforces that partnership at a time when great power competition is intensifying. However, critics argue that civilian nuclear capability always carries strategic implications. The same scientific expertise and industrial infrastructure used for peaceful purposes can, under different political circumstances, support military ambitions. That concern leads directly to the agreement's biggest controversy, because the debate is not really about nuclear power plants. It is about uranium enrichment. Uranium enrichment sounds highly technical, but the concept is actually straightforward. Natural uranium contains only a small percentage of the isotope needed for nuclear fuel. Enrichment increases that concentration, so reactors can generate electricity. The problem is that the same enrichment technology can also produce weapons-grade material if taken to much higher levels. That does not mean every country enriching uranium intends to build nuclear weapons. Several countries legally enrich uranium under international safeguards, but enrichment significantly shortens the technical pathway should a government ever decide to pursue military capability. This explains why Israel and many non-proliferation experts have expressed concern. They fear establishing enrichment infrastructure inside Saudi Arabia creates capabilities that future governments could potentially expand. Saudi officials reject that interpretation. They insist the program serves peaceful energy needs and economic modernization. However, Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman himself stated in 2018 that while Saudi Arabia did not seek nuclear weapons, the kingdom would develop them as soon as possible if Iran acquired one. That statement continues to shape international debate today. The proposed agreement reportedly includes safeguards, including American oversight and limitations if Washington objects after the joint study. Still, many experts believe the enrichment provision represents the most significant departure from previous U.S. agreements in the Gulf. Yet the regional consequences may extend far beyond Saudi Arabia itself. Timing makes this agreement particularly significant. The United States recently justified military action against Iran by arguing it wanted to prevent Tehran from ever obtaining nuclear weapons capability. Now, Washington appears willing to support civilian nuclear development for another regional power. American officials argue the situations differ fundamentally because Saudi Arabia would operate within an agreement negotiated with Washington under international oversight. Iran, they argue, repeatedly violated international obligations over many years. Nevertheless, regional perceptions often matter as much as legal distinctions. Other Middle Eastern governments will closely examine whether this agreement establishes a new precedent. The deal also signals another important shift. Previous U.S. administrations often linked expanded cooperation with Saudi Arabia to normalization of diplomatic relations between Riyadh and Israel. Current reports suggest this nuclear agreement will move forward independently of any Saudi-Israeli normalization. That reflects changing regional priorities after years of conflict in Gaza, tensions with Iran, and evolving security calculations throughout the Middle East. Washington appears increasingly focused on strengthening bilateral partnerships even when broader regional diplomacy remains unresolved. For the United States, the deal secures major commercial opportunities while limiting Chinese and Russian influence over Gulf nuclear development. It also reinforces Washington's strategic relationship with one of its closest regional partners. For Israel, however, the agreement presents a complex strategic dilemma. Israel values strong U.S. Saudi relations, but remains deeply cautious about any regional expansion of uranium enrichment capabilities, regardless of current political intentions. For Iran, the agreement will almost certainly receive close attention. Tehran may argue that Washington applies different standards to different regional powers, while Gulf rivals could view the deal as another step in the broader strategic competition shaping the Middle East. For the wider world, this agreement highlights a growing reality. Civilian nuclear energy is returning as countries seek cleaner electricity, energy security, and technological independence. But every expansion of nuclear capability also raises difficult questions about long-term proliferation risks. Managing that balance will remain one of international diplomacy's greatest challenges. The proposed U.S.-Saudi nuclear agreement is not simply about building reactors. It is about building trust, shaping alliances, and managing technologies powerful enough to light entire cities, or, if handled recklessly, transform the strategic balance of an entire region.